Hi, good morning. Basta. Yung mga ano, yung mga participants, papasukin natin ano, mga 2 minutes before 10 o'clock. Huwag muna natin papasukin pagka Siyempre, papasukin natin sila, yung mga speakers, pero yung mga participants, huwag natin papasukin kaagad.
Okay.
Para kung may last minute tayo, hindi na kailangan marinig naman yun.
Sige.
Tapos, yung program, siyempre, ipa-flash ko, no?
Oo.
Ita-test ko,
Okay.
Pasensya na yung background, hindi masyado maganda, pero...
Okay, maganda nga eh. Kaya lang, Tony, medyo nakakasilaw. Kasi,
Oo nga.
oo, nakakasilaw dahil maliwanag yung likod mo. Pero okay ka, malinaw din yung mukha
Hindi,
mo.
hindi yung angle na lang siguro.
Okay. Ah.
Oo nga, sinubukan na nga remedyohan ng anak ko.
Pero hindi naman masyado dahil may ilaw, mukhang may ilaw ka naman sa harap mo. Okay. Marami ka rin palang bintana, no? Ako rin eh, kaya may...
Oo. Ganyan. Ganyan siguro.
Dito maganda.
O kaya lang walang table. Hindi, maglalagay na lang. Ihanggan na siguro. Maglalagay ako ng ano. Sige. Anyway, hindi, subukan ko muna ng ano. I-flash ko muna yung ano.
Okay.
Yung... Okay naman? Nakikita
Okay na.
nyo?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Sige. Tapos, play ko.
Okay.
El reconocimiento de Cuba en el desarrollo y producción de vacunas contra enfermedades infecciosas ha servido de base en la búsqueda de nuevos candidatos vacunales contra el SARS-CoV-2. El doctor Eduardo Martínez, presidente del Grupo Empresarial Biocuba Pharma, considera que los resultados que exhibe hoy la mayor de las Antillas no pueden desligarse de los grandes hitos de la biotecnología cubana y de la actualización permanente de sus científicos.
Desde el inicio que surgió la pandemia en China, pensamos en una vacuna. Nosotros tenemos un centro conjunto chino-cubano de investigación y desarrollo. Este proyecto de vacuna, en este caso que estamos haciendo en ese centro, tiene una característica que es una vacuna universal para los coronavirus.
Doctor, ¿cuántos candidatos vacunales tiene Cuba y por qué el desarrollo de tantos candidatos vacunales?
Desde el principio se diseñaron varios candidatos vacunales en nuestras instituciones, teniendo en cuenta la experiencia y las tecnologías de plataforma que nosotros tenemos. O sea, teníamos que obtener antígenos del virus para esto. Y también estamos trabajando, por ejemplo, en vacunas cuyos antígenos son de origen peptídico. Nosotros recientemente inauguramos una planta para producir péptidos y bueno, estamos también usando esta tecnología como como en algunos de nuestros candidatos vacunales. Por supuesto que en el camino hay algunos ya que se han ido descartando y ya hemos ido concentrando en estos momentos, además de Soberana 1, nosotros ya hay un segundo candidato vacunal del Instituto Finley que está concluyendo su etapa de estudios preclínicos y nosotros pensamos que próximamente, bueno, después que el CERME evalúe, pudiera también ya estar iniciando sus pruebas humanas. el Centro de Ingeniería Genética y Biotecnología también tiene varios candidatos vacunales que los estudios en los modelos animales los
Yan yung isa, tetest ko rin yung ano, yan yung version na nakasave sa computer ko eh. Tetest ko yung version na sinend mo sa akin, Cora. Ito yun.
El reconocimiento de Cuba en el desarrollo y producción de vacunas contra enfermedades. El reconocimiento de Cuba en el desarrollo y producción de vacunas contra enfermedades infecciosas ha servido de base en la búsqueda de nuevos candidatos vacunales contra el SARS-CoV-2. El doctor Eduardo Martínez, presidente del grupo empresarial BioCuba Pharma.
Okay. Ano pa ba? Tapos yung
Yung PowerPoint.
yung PowerPoint ni Doktora, sandali ah. Hi, Miel. Good morning.
Hello. Nakita mo yung mga pinadala kong posibleng tanong?
Hindi ko pa nabuksan eh. Inaayos ko tong program eh. Tsaka yung ano. Pero bubuksan ko ngayon. Gusto ko lang masigurado na tong mga... Nakikita nyo?
Yes,
Mm-mm.
yes.
Teka, from the start.
Yung question number 2 lang, Miel. Masyadong mahaba.
Ano?
Yung question
Mahaba.
number 2 masyadong mahaba. At saka para bang kung wala siya doon sa lecture niya, kung nandun sa lecture niya, okay lang. Pero parang yung dapat magtanong, parang isang expert eh, na yung kung ganun yung framing ng question. Kasi parang ang dami niyang preface, no? So, either comment siya or
Kasi di ba comments and questions naman yon?
but who is going to do that, you know? A lay person who's not so knowledgeable about these things. Hindi siya, it's not a credible question coming from anybody, no? But if maybe a doctor or somebody who follows the issue, pwede, no? Kasi parang lumalabas planted, no? Yung ganon. So siguro baka si ano pwede. Si Sylvia or ano. Or ikaw. Ano nangyari kay ano? Okay. Who can share of our participants? Okay na, Tony. You have...
Yan, mas okay, no?
Yep. Okay naman. Medyo ano na. Oo. Tsaka okay yan. May ilaw kasi sa harapan mo, no? Yeah.
Sa harap ko nilagay yung ilaw.
Oo, tama yun. Kaya maganda, oo.
Yan. Ayos.
Ayos.
Hindi.
Yan.
Premise.
Yan. Nawawala na yung glare mo. Wala na yung glare sa background. Okay, good.
Magbibisa ko ng
Sa
konti.
bagay, Cora.
Miel.
Kasi talagang sinusubaybayan ko to.
O kaya
Sabi ko, ang
nga,
laki-laki pala talaga ng ginagastos, di ba?
oo.
The fact na nagbigay ang mga gobyerno ng 1.9 billion.
Hindi, ang ibig ko lang sabihin, not anybody can ask that question, no? Or make that comment. 'Di ba? You cannot ask, for example, an ordinary person, hindi naman niya sinusundan. Ikaw siguro, or maybe Sylvia can do it, or sino
Kasi
pa?
tatanong to kay ambassador to, ha? Oo.
Uh,
Yung, may pera ba? Parang ganon. Kalaki-laki pala ng gastos ng ano, tapos ibibigay nyo ng libre. Hindi ba kayo magkakautang niyan? Parang ganon.
pwede mong ibaba ng konti yung ano mo itaas mo pa ng konti para makita naman namin yung mata mo. Oh, a little. Oh,
Yan.
sige. Okay yan, okay yan. Yan, mas maganda naman. Ang hirap naman yung noo mo lang ang nakalabas eh.
Eh baka naman kita naman ang bibig ko.
Ah,
Di ba?
Hindi halata. Okay. Asan si Princess?
Baka dapat ayusin yung ano, yung intro ko, pala mukhang ano eh,
Ano?
nagiging yung intro, yung ginawa ni Weng. Oh, of course maganda siya. Kaya lang nagiging outdated by the minute eh.
Oo.
True.
Yung bilang ng namamatay ay ano yung laki ng ano ngayon eh may ano inabot ng COVID eh. Doon sa nakasulat 65 million?
O yata.
Oo.
Actually, pwede mo namang
Hindi, ayusin ko na konti. Hindi, may nakuha ko sa ano eh, sa New York Times at saka sa, syempre yung mga ano lang yung mga, alam mo naman ang New York Times saka yung mga Western Press medyo bias yung mga yan. Pero yung mga ano lang, yung mga intro lang na may nagde-develop ng vaccine, blah blah blah, yung mga ganun lang.
Saan ang New York Times naman ang may vaccine tracker.
Parang
so,
ganun.
Oo, sa vaccine, as of December 5, meron silang, binanggit nilang meron 86 na nasa pre-clinical at saka 58 na nasa clinical. O yun.
Oo, mas ganun lang. Oo. Tsaka, hindi, actually, mas yung kinuha ko sa The Guardian ng UK, mas less bias pero syempre. UK pa rin yan. So, papakita ko sa inyo inaayos ko ng konti yung ano ni. Tsaka, pwede bang magano? Pwede ba may magtumingin ng numbers sa Philippines? Baka syempre dapat sabihin natin yung sa Philippines kung ilan ang namatay, ilan ang...
Sige, tingnan natin.
Mas ganun lang. Tapos, eto. Yung rationale for the webinar, medyo binago ko.
okay.
Mm-mm.
Sure.
Pero hindi ko babasahin lahat yung highlights lang siguro. Actually, Pero yung latter part na ginawa ni Weng, niretain ko. Pakita ko sa inyo, kahit na pakitignan nyo lang ng briefly. Hindi, email ko na lang pala. Baka lumabas sa chat mamaya. Sige, email ko na lang. Hi, good morning again. And welcome to our webinar on Soberana, the Cuban vaccine. Please allow me to present to you our program for today. So the first part, it's going to be a message from Dr. Francisco Nemenzo, president of PhilCuba, which started out actually in 2000. Dr. Nemenzo is also the chairperson of the Asia Pacific Regional Conference of Solidarity with Cuba, and most importantly, perhaps, former president of the University of the Philippines. For the first part, we will Soberana and vaccine development in Cuba. It's about a 7-minute video presentation. The presenter will be Dr. Eduardo Martinez, president of the Biotechnological and Pharmaceutical Industries Group of Cuba, Cuba Pharma. He will be joined as speaker by Dr. Vicente Veres. He's the director of Finlay Institute, Center for Vaccines Research and Production. For the second part, we are very fortunate to have with us Dr. Nina Gloriani, PhD. She's a medical doctor. She's a clinical biology consultant, chair of the Department of Science and Technology, expert vaccine panel on COVID-19 vaccine clinical trials. She's also a member of the WHO Scientific Steering Committee for COVID-19 Solidarity Vaccines Trial. And she will speak about insights into vaccine development and trials in the Philippines. For the second part, we are extremely fortunate to have Her Excellency Ibete Fernandez Hernandez. She's the Cuban ambassador to Malaysia and non-resident ambassador to the Philippines. And she will share with us the effect of US-imposed blockade on Soberana and Cuban sovereignty. After which we will have an open forum for about 30 minutes. We will welcome your questions, your comments also. And then thereafter, we will have summary and final thoughts by Ms. Maria Miel Laurinaria. She's a member of a PhilCuba working group, and she's a very, very ardent, she follows a lot of developments in Cuba, particularly on the Soberana vaccine. And finally, we will have announcement of upcoming PhilCuba activities to be given by Ms. Gina de la Cruz. She's the PhilCuba. And after that, we would like to request that you stay for our picture taking, and thereafter we will the seminar. So we would like to we would like to have, okay, allow me to okay, sorry, allow me to have the rationale for this seminar. Unfortunately, I don't have to give much details, considering that everybody knows the extent, the magnitude of this pandemic. But let's just mention a couple. At the moment, latest figures, we have 71,995 coronavirus cases. The total deaths, and these are figures from The Guardian in the United Kingdom. Total deaths amount to 1,526,001 individuals. So as countries begin deploying vaccines in the coming weeks and months, the WHO Director General, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing his name, urged all countries to prioritize those most in need. So he mentioned that among the priorities should be workers in the healthcare sector, also people with high serious disease or death due to their age. And also he mentioned thereafter it should be followed by people with higher risk of severe disease due to underlying conditions. And finally, marginalized groups. And we can easily infer from that people from developing and in fact least developed countries. Vaccines typically require years of research and testing in the clinic, but scientists are racing to produce a safe and effective coronavirus vaccine by next year. Although I read this morning that today, Tuesday, the United Kingdom will start giving out the vaccines and vaccinating people today. In fact, there's an 86-year-old gentleman who volunteered to be the first one to be vaccinated. So work began in January with the deciphering of SARS-CoV genome. The first vaccine safety trials in humans started in March of this year, and now 13 have reached the final stages of testing. Some of these trials will fail up without a clear result. But a few vaccines may succeed in stimulating the immune system to produce effective antibodies against the virus. However, and this is the meat of our seminar, little to no attention is given to vaccines being developed elsewhere, such as those in Cuba. considering that this island nation has been recognized widely as one of the countries with the best healthcare systems in the world, as well as having excelled in biological advances. Cuba has been able to produce breakthrough in medical products, primarily vaccines against certain kinds of cancer and other chronic disease or illnesses. A rare and extremely admirable feat for a small developing nation. Cuba's accomplishments are laudable, especially in despite of the US's deplorable continuing threat of 60 years of criminal blockade against this country with a population of 11 million. The is not engaged in vaccine development, but it has nonetheless agreed to accept clinical trials and has issued pronouncements of acquiring vaccine doses. Through inputs from our resource speakers and audience participation, we hope to achieve through this webinar the following objectives. The first, provide information on Cuba's COVID-19 vaccine, Soberana 1, as its lead vaccine, among others. So the country's biological pharmaceutical, it is actually the country's current biological pharmaceutical advancement, top advancement. Challenges that the country faces despite barriers from blockade imposed by the US. We will encourage our participants to ask questions and give their comments. By the way, in the Philippines, as of the moment, we have 439,434 cases of coronavirus. Unfortunately, the deaths have amounted to 8,554 individuals. At this point, I would like to welcome Dr. Francisco Nemenzo, President of PhilCuba, to give us his opening remarks, his opening statements. You may have the floor, Kadudong, Dr. Francisco Nemenzo. Thank you.
Good morning. As President of the Philippine-Cuba Cultural and Friendships Association, I welcome you to this seminar on Soberana, an anti-COVID vaccine developed by Cuban scientists. Within our limited resources, PhilCuba is trying to beat the US effort to keep us ignorant of the great achievements of Cuba despite the deprivations and enormous difficulties the US has inflicted on the Cuban people in the last 50 years, in the longest and most cruel blockade in history. This seminar aims to inform Filipinos of Cuba's revolution in biotechnology and its significant contribution to the fight against COVID. If you want to know more about Cuba's achievements in this and other fields of medicine, education, science, and technology, I invite you to enroll in the PhilCuba mailing list. So we will forward to you online articles and news dispatches from international media who defy the State Department. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kadudong. Thank you, Dr. Nemenzo. So for the next part, I guess this is the meat of the topic for today. We will have a 7-minute video presentation. It's going to be in Spanish, but there's going to be subtitle in English. So give me a few seconds to share it with you.
Conocimiento de Cuba en el desarrollo y producción de vacunas contra enfermedades infecciosas ha servido de base en la búsqueda de nuevos candidatos vacunales contra el SARS-CoV-2. El doctor Eduardo Martínez, presidente del Grupo Empresarial Biocuba Pharma, considera que los resultados que exhibe hoy la mayor de las Antillas no pueden desligarse de los grandes hitos de la biotecnología cubana y de la actualización permanente de científicos.
Desde el inicio que surgió la pandemia en China, pensamos en una vacuna. Nosotros tenemos un centro chino-cubano de investigación y desarrollo de vacunas. En este caso que estamos haciendo en ese centro, tiene una característica que es una vacuna universal para los coronavirus.
Doctor, ¿cuántos candidatos vacunales tiene Cuba y por qué el desarrollo de tantos candidatos vacunales?
Desde el principio se diseñaron varios candidatos vacunales en nuestras instituciones, teniendo en cuenta la experiencia y las tecnologías de plataforma que nosotros tenemos. O sea, teníamos que obtener antígenos del virus para esto. Y también estamos trabajando, por ejemplo, en vacunas cuyos antígenos son de origen peptídico. Nosotros recientemente inauguramos una planta para producir péptidos. Bueno, estamos también usando esta tecnología como en algunos de nuestros candidatos vacunales. Por supuesto que en el camino hay algunos ya que se han ido descartando y ya hemos ido concentrando en estos momentos, además de Soberana 1, nosotros ya hay un segundo candidato vacunal del Instituto Finlay que está concluyendo su etapa de estudios preclínicos. Y nosotros pensamos que próximamente, después que el CERME evalúe, pudiera también ya estar realizando sus pruebas humanas. El Centro de Ingeniería Genética y Biotecnología también tiene varios candidatos vacunales que los estudios en los modelos animales, los resultados están siendo satisfactorios. Una vez que se completen esos estudios, bueno, se presenta la autorización para realizar el ensayo clínico. Una vez que sea aprobada, también entraría. Nosotros pensamos que antes que finalice el año 2020, nosotros vamos a poder tener en fase de evaluación clínica en humanos 3 o 4 candidatos vacunales. ¿Por qué evaluar más de una variante? Bueno, esto es un estudio, son estudios que estamos haciendo. Los estudios, hasta que no se demuestre al final que primero que la vacuna es segura y que es efectiva, o sea, que es capaz de tener la respuesta inmunológica que esperamos y que se necesita contra el virus, esos estudios van a decirnos y no podemos apostarle a un solo candidato, de modo tal que la idea es, usando esta plataforma nuestra, tener más de una variante. También tener más de un candidato vacunal nos va a permitir que estudiemos a lo mejor algunas de estas vacunas para niños, otras vacunas adultos, y dentro de los adultos, algunas de estas variantes en adultos mayores de 60 años.
La industria biofarmacéutica cubana fabrica hoy 8 de las 11 vacunas que se utilizan en el programa ampliado de inmunización.
Tenemos la suerte de contar hoy con muchos de esos compañeros, esos científicos, incluso junto al comandante en jefe, trabajaron y desarrollaron todas estas vacunas que han sido realmente de gran utilidad y que junto con todo nuestro sistema de salud pública, con el programa de inmunización, ha permitido brindar los resultados que hoy podemos decir de enfermedades que han sido completamente eliminadas.
Una historia de vacunas con aciertos en su desarrollo y con resultados relevantes frente a graves problemas de salud marcan hoy la estrategia de Cuba frente a la COVID-19. Con la inscripción de un nuevo ensayo clínico registrado este domingo, el Instituto Finlay continúa en la avanzada en los proyectos de vacunas contra la COVID-19. En esta ocasión, el objetivo es evaluar seguridad e inmunogenicidad de diferentes formulaciones y esquemas de dosis de Soberana 01.
Quiere decir que nosotros estamos llevando paralelamente varias fórmulas de Soberana 1 para tratar de ver cuál es la que despierta la mejor respuesta inmune. Ya sabemos que es segura y por lo tanto ahora el reto está en ver cuál es la que despierta mejor el sistema inmune para con eso seguir hacia adelante.
Según el sitio web del Registro Cubano de Ensayos Clínicos, a partir de hoy hasta el 9 de noviembre tendrá lugar esta fase 1 del estudio en la cual participarán 3 grupos. El doctor Vicente Vélez Bencomo aseguró también que próximamente debe inscribirse el ensayo clínico del candidato vacunal Soberana 02, basado en la plataforma de la vacuna cubana de Hémófilo influenzae tipo B, la primera de uso en humanos cuyo antígeno se obtiene por síntesis química.
O sea, estamos listos para iniciar el ensayo clínico, tenemos toda la preparación para iniciar el ensayo clínico y bueno, por lo tanto estamos a la espera de que de pronunciamiento de nuestra autoridad regulatoria, que bueno, que siempre es importante que tenga tiempo para evaluar y cualquier propuesta. Bueno, estamos en esa fase ahora de evaluación de la autoridad regulatoria. Los ensayos en animales, tanto de la variante de Soberana 1 como la variante de Soberana 2, han funcionado muy bien en animales. Lo segundo que sabemos es que nuestras vacunas son muy seguras. En ese sentido, el reto es acercarnos en la inmunidad que despertamos a la que ya despertamos en animales. Porque ya sabemos que en animales tenemos esa capacidad de despertarla, pero no estamos seguros que en los seres humanos, además lo que se está viendo en el coronavirus es que los seres humanos respondemos mucho menos que lo que responden los animales a las diferentes formas o antígenos del coronavirus.
Hemófilo influenzae tipo B resulta uno de los pilares del desarrollo de vacunas en Cuba. 17 años cumple este hito de la biotecnología, resultado original de la Universidad de La Habana, junto a investigadores de varias entidades científicas.
El gran reto fue reproducir la sustancia que está en la bacteria con métodos químicos nada más. Eso nos llevó 14 años.
Magkano ba? Magkano?
Estamos hablando de que la vacuna estuvo culminada en el año 2003. O sea, en el año 2003, cuando terminamos la vacuna y la ponemos a disposición del país, ya el país había logrado empezar a importar una vacuna de hemófilos conjugada de una empresa italiana en aquel momento, que era la única que había podido adquirir. Y eso significó realmente una erogación de millones de dólares para el país durante los 3 o 4 años que se estuvo haciendo. Las cosas que hemos aprendido de las vacunas conjugadas, primero hemos aprendido a hacerlas tecnológicamente como institución, porque bueno, tenemos muchos años de experiencia en eso. Segundo, hay un grupo de ventajas que tiene una vacuna conjugada, y es que se ha visto que la vacuna conjugada induce un tipo de inmunidad que ayuda a eliminar de toda la mucosa de las vías aéreas superiores, ayuda a eliminar las bacterias. O sea, no solamente previene la enfermedad, sino previene la infección. Y eso sería muy bueno si lo lográramos también con este grupo.
Un legado que fructifica hoy contra la COVID-19 en manos de sus fundadores. Gisela García Rivero, Sistema Informativo de la Televisión Cubana.
Okay, thank you very much. It was really extremely impressive, no? Considering that Cuba is facing blockade from the United States of America, and considering that Cuba is developing countries just like the Philippines with lots and lots of challenges. But I think highlights is the fact that when governments actually give priority to healthcare system, there's something to build on. So it was quite for Cuba to start developing their own vaccines despite all of the challenges. For the next part, we're extremely lucky again to have with us Dr. Nina Gloriani. Dr. Nina is a medical doctor with a PhD to boot. She is a clinical microbiology consultant, chair of the Department of Science and Technology, and expert panel on COVID-19 vaccine clinical trials. She's also a member of the WHO, the World Health Organization, Scientific Steering Committee for COVID-19 Solidarity Vaccines Trial. Dr. Nina obtained her PhD in microbial immunology and immunochemistry from the University of Melbourne in Australia, and served as the Dean of the College of Public Health of the University of the Philippines in Manila. She established and led the I'm very sorry because I'm legally blind actually. She established and led the microbial immunology research group that developed the Leptovax vaccine against 4 leptospirosis serovars, which are prevalent here in the Philippines. And without further ado, Dr. Nina Gloriani,
Yes,
you may have the floor.
yes, thank you very much and good morning, Her Excellency Ivete Fernandez Hernandez, my former UP President, Dr. Nemenso. I'm glad to see you again. And just to say a few things first, that I have had the privilege of visiting Havana, Cuba, I think early in the 2000s. So that is actually when all these vaccines that were just presented were being produced by the country. So that was indeed a privilege, and I got to know how the country has moved despite, what we hear about the blockages. So anyway, I'm here to share with you the short presentation I have. Some of you may have seen many of these already, but maybe, sorry, I'll just give a different perspective now. So compared to Cuba, who has actually been working very hard on producing its own vaccines against COVID-19. The Philippines just tests under clinical trials some of the foreign produced vaccines. And so I'll give you this outline. I'll present the types of COVID-19 vaccines clinical trials in the Philippines, our approval process, the vaccine platforms that we have evaluated, a little about the evaluation process that the vaccine expert panel does, and then I'll enumerate some of the independent clinical trial applications we have received as of November 30, and then go into a little discussion on the Solidarity vaccines clinical trials in the Philippines and just some summary statements. Okay, so there are two types of COVID-19 vaccines clinical trials here in the Philippines. We have the independent clinical trials. These are funded by private companies, either in bilateral partnership with the Philippines or by their own, by their own volition. So for the bilateral partners, we initially forged bilateral partnership with China, Taiwan, and then later with Russia, Australia, Japan, USA, UK, and I think other countries. I have not updated with that. But we do receive also applications from other companies where we have no partnership, where the country has no partnership. But the Philippines is engaging in the Solidarity vaccines trials funded by the World Health Organization, our very own Department of Science and Technology, and the Department of Health. The Philippines has officially submitted its intent to participate and has nominated the principal investigator to oversee these Solidarity trials. And the conduct of these clinical trials in the Philippines follows official regulatory processes that have been approved by the Interagency Task Force for Emerging Infectious Diseases. So just to mention that we have had resolutions 39 and 44, which approved the bilateral partners and the partnerships, and resolution 65, which actually approved the guidelines on the approval process of the clinical trial applications. So this is how this process was streamlined. We had to work through this for about 2 to 3 months before we were able to finalize. Compared to the other vaccines that the FDA actually approves, like those for measles, polio, for instance, or hepatitis vaccines, the COVID is special because the COVID-19 vaccines will have to go through the Department of Science and Technology Vaccine Expert Panel for preliminary screening. So we do the initial technical evaluation. So if you note this particular process here, the submission of requirements starts at the DOST level. We have a sub-TWG for vaccine development. So we are given 14 days to do that, but normally we finish the evaluation process in 5 to 7 days. So we can move and forward to the single joint research ethics boards. So the technical evaluation is done by us, but the SJ-RED that we call is the one that looks more closely into the ethical aspects of the application. So that's 14 days, and after that, if everything is okay, the documents are forwarded to FDA for other requirements. Like they look at other submissions like GMP facilities, if they're The vaccine companies are licensed to operate all their licenses, their accreditation, their certifications, and it also goes to another evaluation by its own, the FDA expert panel or scientific advisory group. And after about 40 days, hopefully less than that, the clinical trial will be approved for implementation along with the import license to, import the vaccine. Now, so you see here, evaluation is taken care of by 3 bodies: the Vaccine Expert Panel, the Single Joint Research Ethics Board, which is an independent body, and the Food and Drug Authority, which gives the final approval. Now, during the clinical trials, the monitoring is the responsibility of the local data safety monitoring board for the Solidarity Vaccines trials, and the FDA has its own committee on oversight monitoring this clinical trial implementation. But post-marketing surveillance is the turf of the FDA and other agencies or bodies of the Department of Health. Okay, so these are the COVID-19 vaccine platforms that are in phase 3 clinical trial all over the world as of November 12, 2020. Out of these 11, we have evaluated 5. So these are the ones that are highlighted in yellow here. Clover is a recombinant protein vaccine from Clover. From AstraZeneca, Gamaleya, this is Russia, and Janssen from the US. These are adenovirus vectored vaccines, so different adenoviruses. And for the inactivated vaccine, we have evaluated Sinovac. Okay, just to give you a brief idea, well, an idea of how we actually do the technical evaluation. So we generally follow the WHO criteria for vaccines prioritization for clinical phase 2B to 3 trials based on, of course, safety first, efficacy, stability, implementation, and vaccine availability or supply. Actually, only the 3 should be technical, but we are also asked to comment or give our inputs to the implementation and vaccine supply in the country. So you know, these are not just the things that we look for, but there's so many other things that we consider before we approve or technically clear any clinical trial submission. So I already presented this last December 4 during the media forum with DOH. So these are the 5 companies that we have and their vaccines that we have actually evaluated. So only 2 have received our technical clearance, that of Sinovac, which is an inactivated whole virus vaccine. So they have complied with, we only have 4 documents that we require. And if they are all okay, then we give our technical clearance and submit or forward to the SJREB and then later to the FDA. The other one is Clover, which we technically cleared last November 24, 2020. So what happens is if there are missing information or some missing documents, or there are some things that we need to clarify, they will have to reply back to us. And if we are okay with those replies, then we give the technical clearance. So some of them are now under SJREB approval, is pending, but I think the Sinovac has already been forwarded to FDA. So then there are 2, well, actually 3, that will still provide that they still have to provide their answers to our comments. So we have deferred action pending submission of those replies and their additional documents. Actually, Janssen should be close to being technically cleared because they have already responded to our comments last December 2. So now we are awaiting official scientific interim data from clinical phase 3 trials of these companies, because actually all of them now have undergoing all over the world phase 3 clinical trials. So some of them would have their interim data by, I think, this December, or maybe others will have their interim clinical phase 3 trial results by early January. So we look forward to actually looking at those data and see their results. Much like what you hear about the Pfizer and Moderna, who have already released their phase 3 interim results. Now let's move on to the WHO Solidarity Vaccine Trial. All trials that we actually evaluate are for phase 3 or phase 2B, but largely phase 3. So the Solidarity Trial is an international, multi-center, double-blind, placebo, or comparator vaccine-controlled randomized trial of candidate vaccines against COVID-19. Now this Solidarity Trial would increase the rapidity of results getting out. These results are expected within 3 to 6 months, at least for the emergency use authorization, the likelihood of finding one or more successful vaccines in a shorter period of time, and the ability to exclude ineffective vaccines. And of course, it should promote international equity. Close to 200 trial sites around the world have expressed interest in participating. And the vaccines to be tested, vaccines to be tested in the Philippines could be announced anytime this week of December 2020. So this trial is actually under a governance framework. We have this is where I am also a member, the Scientific Steering Committee. So the Vaccine Prioritization Group actually reports to the Scientific Steering Committee for the recommendations on the vaccines to be tested under the Solidarity Trial. And then we have this global trial team where the Philippines is included. So we have so they have a network of networks. Okay, so in the Philippines, we have set minimum requirements for clinical trial sites and investigators. Of course, the very first requirement is that initial participating sites should come from high COVID-19 transmission areas. So we're looking at the NCR, Region 4A, Region Metro, maybe Metro Cebu, because at some point in time, they had very high cases of COVID. Then Metro Davao, and now we are looking at some cases rising in the Cordillera Autonomous Region. Also, the hospital sites should have the following: vaccine teams, highly experienced in implementing clinical trials, with updated good clinical practice certificates. So that is required even before we evaluate well, for all of these sites and the vaccine teams. These sites will have to be affiliated, or the vaccine teams will have to be affiliated with accredited hospitals and laboratories with accredited facilities for COVID-19 diagnostics. Because clinical phase 3 trials are for efficacy, so you want to measure the protection against COVID-19. Those who develop signs and symptoms of COVID will have to be tested immediately when they manifest such symptoms, and the COVID-19 diagnostics will have to be in place. So the laboratories in these hospitals are fully accredited with doing the RT-PCR, for instance, and other tests. Now, they also have to be FREB Level 3 accredited research ethics committees. So all these hospitals are Level 3 accredited research ethics committees. They should be able to integrate clinical research space into their existing clinical practices. So the cooperation of the hospitals is very important, because they will have to provide space for vaccine storage, archive space and equipment, as well as workspace for clinical research associates and clinical research coordinators. So we have here listed 14 hospitals that could potentially be involved in the clinical trial under the Solidarity trials. So the Philippine General Hospital is the lead hospital. Then we have these other hospitals in the NCR, RITM, Manila Doctor, San Lazaro, St. Luke's Medical Center, QCBGC, the Lung Center of the Philippines, the Medical City, Makati Medical Center, and in Region 4A, we have the De La Salle, Medical Center, Health Sciences Center. And in Cebu, we have Vicente Soto Memorial Medical Center for Davao, Southern Philippines Medical Center. We have included also recently Baguio General Hospital and Medical Center, and we hope we can still include the Western Visayas Medical Center. And these are some of the sites that have been identified as of November 30 to be the catchment areas for these communities or barangays are within the catchment areas of these hospitals. So if you take note, this is the map of the Philippines. We have here the National Capital Region, a portion of Cavite in Region 4A, and CAR, just Baguio City. Then we have Iloilo, hopefully, and then Cebu and Davao. Okay, so just for an overview of the WHO Solidarity Vaccine trials in the Philippines, this is an adaptive trial. As I said, the high transmission areas are prioritized for vaccination. We call this the trial zones. And we have zoning guidelines as per the IATF approved guidelines. So we will have fixed trial sites in hospitals or community health stations, but it is possible to also have mobile trial sites or pop-up sites, very much like the ring vaccination strategy that was used during the Ebola outbreak. So what does ring vaccination mean? It is an infection control measure that involves vaccinating a cluster of individuals at high risk for infection based on their social or geographic connection to a known case. This creates a protective ring. So the rings are in different layers. Protective ring or cluster of immune individuals around the newly diagnosed cases, preventing further spread of infection. So as much as possible, we would like to set up pop-up sites. And so most of the hospitals that are included are preparing for that. Currently, we're still debating whether we will have 4,000 or 15,000 participants as requested. We may not be able to really approve the 15,000, but we will try our best because of logistical concerns. That the priority group to recruit in the Solidarity Trial is the general population, the age group 18 to 59 years old, but later on, well, this will have to be those who are high risk for COVID-19 infection, such as we can also include in the vaccination, the trial, the healthcare workers, frontline workers, the contacts of cases, as I already discussed with the ring vaccination. But special groups may be included later, such as the elderly, 60 years and above, children, as well as the immunocompromised. We have defined inclusion and exclusion criteria. The immunization schedule could be 1 to 2 doses. Of course, WHO prefers 1 dose, single dose, but some of the candidates actually have 2 doses. And of course, the vaccinated individuals will be monitored regularly. The primary outcome that will be measured will be vaccine efficacy, and the interim evaluation will be done 3 to 6 months after immunization. But there will be other secondary outcomes like the immune correlates of protection and other immunologic parameters, and of course, the safety monitoring for at least 12 months. Now, under the WHO Solidarity Trial, we have to prepare according to the global participatory practices. So we are well into, at least the Philippine vaccine teams are well into these preparations, and we are helped by the Philippine Department of Health, Health Promotions Bureau, and the communications team, because there will have to be an operational communication and issues management plan to roll this out, to start the clinical trial. And so, setting up optimal trial conduct, coordination and communication structures, all the logistics systems are being prepared now by the Philippine vaccine teams together with the local government units. So this just gives you an idea of what the Department of Health, Health Promotion Bureau is doing. We want to have one voice so that we do not confuse the public. So, because there are also some groups who have some problems or issues or concerns, so we have to maintain a one voice so that everybody understands what all these vaccines are about, the clinical trial is about, and eventually there will be pre-launch, during launching, and post-launch there will be more communication materials that will be prepared. So which ones to choose? Well, we have right now 5 applications, but there may be some other vaccines coming in who are not interested in conducting clinical trials in the Philippines. Nevertheless, those who are just interested in distributing or supplying the vaccines will still have to go to the FDA requirements. So still their vaccines will be evaluated for safety, immunogenicity, and efficacy. So we have seen that there are multiple approaches towards the same goal, producing a safe, effective vaccine against COVID-19. Most likely, It is a combination, it will be a combination of both old technologies and new generation vaccine platforms that will be used for the vaccine development and pandemic response. So right now, we know that multiple companies with different vaccine candidates work together to meet the global demand. What we have to remind everyone that while we are fast-tracking vaccine development efforts, so we have a pandemic vaccine paradigm here, there is need for scientific rigor and integrity in approving vaccines for licensing and commercialization. We require that all vaccine companies submit a pharmacovigilance plan. This is actually the post-marketing surveillance for safety and impact to public health. So long after the first rollout, we need at least 2 to 3 years, maybe even 5 years to follow up on these vaccines. So that it is. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nina Gloriani, for your presentation. But perhaps most importantly, thank you very much for the good work that you have been doing. It's really vital, important. I mean, we cannot express enough our gratitude to you and to your team for the very vital and important thing that you are doing for our country.
Thank you.
For the next part, again, we are very fortunate to have none other than Her Excellency Ibete Fernandez Hernandez. She's the Cuban ambassador to Malaysia and non-resident ambassador to the Philippines. She will share with us the effect of US imposed blockade on Soberana vaccine and Cuban sovereignty. You may have the floor, Your Excellency.
Okay. Good morning to everyone. Dr. Dodon, Dr. Nemenso, Dr. Nina Gloriani, comrades from Cuba and other organizations that are present today in this webinar. As always, it is a pleasure to share information on Cuba relating to any topic. And I'm very grateful that this time you choose to talk about Soberana, because we think that is one of the milestones of the biotechnology industry in Cuba that will serve not only to our country, but also to other countries that may want to be part of what we develop in order to save life. First of all, I would like to start by sharing with you some information that is content in a report that was made in Cuba during the COVID pandemic, in order that you can see how Cuba started facing the conditions in which Cuba face this pandemic, and then we will go to the effects that the blockade has caused to us and how we have been able to develop these vaccines in the midst of this difficult situation. For Cuba, the starting point to face the pandemic must take into account that after reaching an increased rate of 4.4% of GDP in 2015, the economy reduced its average growth rate from 2016 to 2019 to only 1.3%. And the forecast for the 2020 was only 1%. The reduction that registered the economy results during 2019 are due to an unfavorable external context that significantly affected the tourism. That, you know, tourism is our main source of income in Cuba. Also affected the investments, the external financing, and other variables for the economic development of the country. Any analysis on the impact of the pandemic in Cuba must take into account the conditions that the country faced. And I'm going to highlight it to you. The first one is the tightening of the economic, commercial, and financial blockades imposed to US. It has been in this year, last years, the most how can I say, the most fierce that we have had since 1960, when our revolution triumphed. The second one is the economic crisis in Venezuela, that, as you know, is our main trade partner. Also, the accentuated shortage of foreign exchange means in international tourism, that it decreased a lot already in January 2020, has already decreased to 19.6%. The fourth one is the country that have been our country operated for more than 6 months with half of the fuel that it needs for the normal development of the country. The fifth is the complex drought conditions that affected the Caribbean and mostly Cuba, and in particular Havana. The sixth is the agricultural production of key products in 2019 that show some contraction and more than it was planned the year before when we did the plan for our economy. And the seventh is that the monetary exchange duality that, you know, still exists in Cuba, and we are working on it in order to have only one currency, which is a long process, but also this affects our economy. As you know, the Cuban experience includes the participation of the states in activities of production, diffusion, and the use of knowledge. In the use of knowledge, we can point it out the development of the biotechnology industry. In the 80s, you know that this industry started to develop in our country, and from that time, different products like vaccines started to develop. One of them at the first was the meningococcal vaccine against meningitis, and also the Haemophilus influenzae. Both vaccines, as you know, and as you listen to the explanation, are the basis of the vaccines Soberana 1 and Soberana 2. It means that for the developing of the two first candidate vaccines, our starting point was the two vaccines that already exist in the country, developed many years ago. Cuban science has significantly contributed to the successful and efficient confrontation of COVID-19, facilitating various investigations and predictions, and the design of modes of confrontation, the improvement of therapeutic protocols, the management of confrontation with the pandemic, and the improvement of action models to reduce the risk and vulnerabilities to the epidemics. You know that today, as of today, Cuba has a total of 8,906 cases, and only 136 people died because of the pandemic. It means even we are a small population, but it means that the control and the efficacy of the products that we have used have been proved completely and have been working very well for the population and to control the virus. Besides Soberana 01, that started the trials in August, as Dr. Martinez explained in his explanation, in November appears our second vaccine candidate, which is Soberana 02. As I told you before, the base for this vaccine is a Haemophilus influenzae vaccine that was created by a group of scientists in Cuba, led by Dr. Beres, the head of the Vaccine Institute at present. In November 26 this year, the Center of the State Control of Medicines, SECMED, approved to start clinical trials on 2 other vaccines that have been developed by the Engineering Center of Biotechnology in Cuba. The names of those vaccines are Mambisa and Abdala. both vaccines will have already will start trials, and it will be applied in different provinces of the country in order to see how it works in different populations in the country that have been affected by the same virus, but in different ways. So it will allow to see how the acceptance of the people in those sectors of the population will be. The production of vaccines is one of our most significant achievements in the Cuban biotechnology. And as you also hear in the presentation by Dr. Beres and Dr. Martinez, the Cuban immunization scheme has 11 vaccines. 8 of those vaccines are produced in Cuba, which is an important, important achievement for us, because it allows to cover the whole population in the country and to have it immunized and eliminate diseases that, for example, are simple but have not been exterminated maybe in other countries of the world, like polio, for example, and things like that. Now we are going to the effects of the blockade. As you know, blockade constitutes a massive, flagrant, and systematic violation of the human rights of all Cubans, and it qualifies as an act of genocide under the 1948 Convention on the Prevention of Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. It has been applied to our country since 1962. From April 2019 to March 2020, the blockade has caused losses to Cuba by an estimated of $5.5 billion. For the first time, the total amount of damages caused in 1 year exceeds the barrier of $5 billion, which was the normal that we have had in the past, but due to the reinforcement of the blockade by the Trump administration, it managed to surpass the normal numbers that it has had in the past. The damage calculated does not take into account the actions of the US government in the context of the COVID pandemic, because it exceeds the end of the period that we normally take to prepare the report of the annual damages caused by the blockade. It means that in that number that I gave you before, it doesn't contain the damages caused after March 2020, in which was the worst period of the COVID-19 pandemic. In this context, the scourge of a global pandemic such as COVID-19 has posed significant challenges for Cuba, and the country's efforts to combat it have been significantly limited by regulations of the US blockade. The genocidal nature of this policy have been reinforced in the midst of the confrontation with the new coronavirus. Particularly its extraterritorial component, to deliberately deprive the Cuban people of mechanical ventilators, masks, diagnostic kits, protective glasses, suits, gloves, reagents, and other inputs necessary for the management of this disease. It means that blockade has affected the normal supply of other countries that used to have it to our country because of this politic. In the midst of the pandemic, those countries cannot supply to us because they were afraid that they can be punished by US blockade. So imagine that we have to face the first stage of the pandemic in the country without receiving what was needed to treat our population, because we produce drugs, we produce vaccines, but for those things, we need also other components that we have to get it from outside. Well, in the midst of the blockade, it was impossible to get access to it. There has not been enough for the US government, which also launched a crusade to try to discredit and hinder the international medical cooperation that Cuba offers, spreading slanders and going so far as to require other countries to refrain from requesting it, even in the midst of the health emergency created by COVID-19 in the world. Imagine that they don't allow us to buy the products from other countries, but also they were threatening countries not to accept the Cuban medical brigades that will help those governments and those populations to face the pandemic. It was a big campaign that has been in place since 2019 in order to say, well, please please don't accept Cubans because they are dangerous. They are not going to help you. Instead, they are going to create troubles in your country. Or not even saying that, please don't accept it. If not, I will cut the aid that I can give to your country. As previously mentioned, the blockade constitutes the main obstacle to the implementation of the National Economic and Social Development Plan, the 2030 Agenda, and its sustainable development goals in Cuba. Even health and education sectors have been internationally recognized. They are not exempted from the severe impact caused by the US blockade against the island. The health sector has invariably remained among the priorities of the Cuban government, which in 2019 allocated 27.5% of the budget social spending to this area. Despite the efforts made to guarantee access to free and quality care, protection and recovery services to all citizens, the impact of the blockade of this sector is substantial. From April 2019, from March 2020, this policy has caused losses in the health sector estimated at $160 billion, $260,000. The accumulated damage is in almost 6 decades is $3,074 million in the health sector, only in the health sector. The blockade denies the access to US medical technologies, or with more than 10% of components coming from that country, which has negative repercussions on the healthcare of the Cubans. We can make the effort, the government can make the effort of the world trying to have a healthy population, but if we cannot have access to what we need, the quality of what we offer won't be the same. It's impossible, because we produce some things, but others we need support. In many cases, it is not possible to obtain the technologies that allowed for more accurate diagnosis, treatment, and rapid recovery of patients with less invasive interventions. The negative impact of the blockade is aggravated and even crueler in the current context of combating the COVID-19 pandemic. This policy puts additional pressure on our public health sector system by making it difficult to purchase urgently needed materials, equipment, and other inputs to save life. It emphasized the case of a donation of a mechanical pulmonary ventilators, diagnostic kits, masks, and other medical supplies needed to fight COVID-19, sent by the Chinese company Alibaba. This is what I'm mentioning now is a real example. It's an example of how this blockade has affected us during this pandemic, which could not arrive to Cuban territory. The contracted transport company refused to send the cargo to Cuba, claiming that its main shareholder was a US company, so it was subject to blockade regulations. Another medical regrettable example is that the Swiss companies IMT Medical AG and Electronic Medical System AG alleged the sanctions of the blockade to refuse to deliver to Cuba high-tech mechanical pulmonary ventilations, essential for the treatment of patients affected by the new coronavirus. These two companies considered were leaders in the development and manufacture of this medical equipment, have done business with Cuba in the past. They were both purchased by the Illinois-based Viary Medical Inc. Company USA, and therefore have been forced to suspend all commercial relations with our country. It became also known in April 2020 that Swiss banks, UBS and Cantonal Bank of Basel, refused to transfer donations made by the Swiss Solidarity Organizations, Medicuba Swiss, and Organization Suiza, Association Switzerland Cuba, simply because the name of the island was mentioned in the transaction record. These donations were intended to support the emergency aid project, Cuba Against COVID-19, which sought to raise funds for the shipment of reagents for diagnostic tests and protective equipment needed to work in the pandemic. On the other hand, the US government, which is decision to attack the Cuban medical cooperation, threatens the enjoyment of the right of health millions of human beings who have been benefit for the work of Cuban doctors in the four corners in the world. During this period, on the review, the effects of the bilateral agreements signed by Cuba with several countries in American region have been seriously affected. The medical care for 67 million people. It means that 67 million people have been affected because they are deprived of the services of Cuban doctors after agreements that have been reached were broke under pressure of the US government. But to the US government, it doesn't matter for them. On many occasions, the international community have recognized the professionalism and altruism of more than 400,000 Cuban health workers who have carried missions in 164 nations for 60 years. This discredit campaign carried out by US government is immoral under any circumstances, but it's particularly offensive to Cuba and to the world in the midst of a global pandemic. In this scenario, while the current US administration is harshly criticizing and accusing the island, more than 30 Cuban medical brigades have been sent to various countries and territories affected by the coronavirus. Cuba is convinced that this current scenario calls for cooperation and solidarity, and it also shares the results of scientific research with other countries. In February this year, when the Cuban company, during the analyzed period, the import and export company of medical products, Medicuba, contacted seven companies that are part of a supplier portfolio of 50 companies. Only 2 of them replied. The rest didn't say anything. So we couldn't receive the normal supplies that, that we received. Let me see if I can share the PowerPoint that I wrote that has some examples on the blockade. Okay. Wait a minute, please. Okay, here you can see some of the examples, real examples of the application and extraterritoriality of the blockade applied by US. in the sector of health.
We don't see
This
it. We don't
you
see
cannot
No.
see.
No.
No, not yet.
Oh my, I don't know.
I think you can just Ambassador, you can just double click on what does blockade mean to Cuba. Just double.
Oh, wait.
On the document.
On the document.
Yes, and because we can
But
see your computer.
I'm seeing
We can see
the document, but you cannot see the.
No,
we can, but we can see that you're trying to operate your computer from here.
Wait.
So you can try it again.
Yes, let me try.
Because that happened to us also when we were practicing yesterday.
Can
Or
you
the
see
other
it or no? Not yet?
Not yet. Maybe you can. Have you opened the document already?
Yes,
The
I
part-
open it. It's open. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Then just click on share screen. On the lower portion, middle portion of your screen.
Wait.
Of
Let
the
me-
Zoom screen, you will see a share screen.
Oh, let me try again because I told to share. This is the document.
Yeah, just double click on the document, please.
Yes.
I think it should show in a while.
Still no?
No, not yet, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, okay. I will read it then. Let me go there to the examples that I had. I don't know why it's not sharing. It says you are sharing your screen, but
Yeah, we can see your like a computer. We can see the screen on your computer, but not the PowerPoint presentation itself.
okay. Well, as I told you, I wanted to mention some of the examples of the application of the blockade. On July 16, 2019, those examples are in the annual report of the damages caused by the blockade between March 2019 and April 2019 and March 2020. In July 16, 2019, the airlines Emirates rejected a shipment of drug cardiovapa levopoda contracted by Medicuba for the Indian manufacturer and supply Apex Drug House, arguing that they could not transport goods destined for Cuba. The situation considerably delayed the delivery of the said drugs, having to urgently look for another commercial alternative. That drug is used to treat the symptoms for Parkinson's disease. On December 3, 2019, Nutricia Company refused to deliver to a supplier of Medicuba an order for nutritional supplements and foods for medical use, which are especially in the dietary management of disorders and diseases, alleging that the activation of the Title III of Helms-Burton Act. In August 2019, Sunshine Private Limited of India refused to accept shipment documents for a Medicuba business transaction involving the purchase of a drug, progesterone, resulting in the delay in shipment and delivery. Progesterone is used for the assisted reproduction program. During that one I told you already, the 50 companies of our portfolio, we contact them and only 2 response. In the case of Royal Philips NV, they were asked for 80 units of CVX 300 used for coronary angioplasty, also called percutaneous coronary intervention, a minimal invasive procedure used to open obstruct arteries at the heart. The company responds that it is not in the position to do business with Medicuba because of regulatory and export control imposed by the US government. Janssen Pharmaceutica, a subsidiary of Johnson & Johnson was requested for the treatment of castration-resistant prostate cancer, and no answer were obtained. Pfizer Pharmaceuticals was asked for palbociclib for the treatment of hormone-sensitive metastatic breast cancer, for the treatment of metastatic renal carcinoma, and for the lung cancer, but no reply was obtained. Another example is also with cancer treatment that they didn't respond. Other one for lymphoma after transplantation, no response. Another one, Baxter International INC was requested the arterial and venous pediatric lines, even for children, used for newborns and infants that are acute renal failure. No answer. Another company, Nanostronic Technologies, US company, was contacted for the acquisition of equipment with Illumina technology, which allows sequencing of whole genome and malignant tumor and defining molecular alteration related to specific treatments. It also used for molecular diagnosis. No response. Okay, those are the examples of how the blockade affects the Cuban health system. No matter how many efforts you do that, always they will be there stopping on trying to avoid that we have normal relation and normal development, and trying to cope the advancement that we have done in health and education. As you know, the Henry Reef Brigade celebrated the 50th anniversary in October. In the course of these 15 years, the Henry Reef International Brigade have been part of international efforts to increase cooperation between nations and in the health sector care. In the health care sector, in the last 5 months, it has carried out a remarkably efficient work in the fight against COVID-19 pandemic. That's why have been nominated for the Nobel Prize of Peace. Currently, the world is fighting the COVID-19 pandemic, which implies great efforts in terms of government funding to guarantee medical treatment to citizens, as well as to keep the economy running. In our case, have been difficult, but at least we have succeeded in controlling with efficacy the pandemic in Cuba, despite all the difficulties that we have faced. As I told you, blockade have been very difficult in the last years of this administration. That's why we are calling to all our friends to continue fighting against it, because it's the main obstacle for our development and for the normal carried out of a government with all the advantages that it presents in social terms for the whole population of Cuba. I also was asked to talk about Cuban sovereignty. If you allow me, I don't know if we still have time, I would like to share with you or to read to you an article that was written for our former Minister of Culture, that is at the current moment the president of Casa de las Americas. As you may be aware, last 2 weeks have been, Cuba have been in the media, mainstream media, talking about riots of instability because a group of people were doing a hunger strike and they wanted to create like atmosphere that something were happening in Cuba. And the battle, how can I, not the battle, but the situation get worse because of the social media in which many things were reproduced. I just wanted to read out what the minister says, that former minister said, that can explain to you what really happened of the country. Cuba, first of all, I want to tell you before reading that there was not such a movement. It was a farce. It was something, it was a lie. They were not doing a hunger strike. They were paid by US government in order to create that show that there were problems in Cuba. And it was proved that they were behind this. Give me one minute for you to know. The article is called Culture and Revolution. It talks also about our sovereignty, for what we are fighting, why we created our own vaccine, because we need to be ready for anything that happens. Cuba is not going to negotiate with people that inside the country doesn't want doesn't care about the homeland, that people that are just annexionist. We may have problems and we can discuss it with the people, but from a constructive point of view, but not with people that respond to the interest of US, because the revolution and all the advantage that we have today has cost a lot of blood and a lot of sacrifice from our people. Okay, culture and revolution. Not by chance was October 20 chosen as the day of Cuban culture. I remember with how much pride Armando Hart reiterated the importance that the date on which the Bayamo hymn was sung for the first time served to pay tribute to the men and women who are the protagonists of the country's cultural life. Thus, Hart said, the organic identification between our creators and the patriotic anti-slavery and anti-colonial ideals of 1868, enriched later by Martí, Mella, Guiteras, Fidel, have been synthesized in an excellent way. The triumphant revolution in 1959 received enthusiastic support from the overwhelming majority of Cuban artists and writers. Many, even who live abroad, returned to the island to join in the construction of the new world. Although the aggressiveness of the US began very early through pressure and threats, attacks, bombings, financing of armed guns, and a fierce media campaign. The revolutionary government didn't neglect the promotion of culture. It founded the ICAIC, which is the Institute of Films, Casa de las Americas, the National Printing Office, and the first School of Arts instructors, and carried out the literacy campaign. According to Carpentier, the times of solitude had ended for the Cuban writer, and those of solidarity had begun. And it is that the revolution formed a massive and avid public for the arts and letters. It also gave a space to the most genuine and discriminated expressions of popular traditions, and to the most audacious searches in the various artistic genres. Unable to perceive the deep ties between culture and the revolution, the Yankees insisted on organizing groups of dissidents, so-called dissidents, in the intellectual circles, but they failed again and again. The case of Armando Valladares was the result of desperation. He was exhibited before the world as an invalid poet, prisoner of conscience. They even published a book of poems with great publicity and dramatic title, From My Wheelchair. But he was neither a poet nor a paralytic. He nimbly climbed the plains ladder when he was pardoned. He had a murky past as a police officer under the Batista tyranny, and have been sanctioned for terrorist activities. Now, many years later, they present an alleged movement, San Isidro, as an alleged rapper prosecuted for content, and an alleged hunger strike by a dozen alleged young artists. They were backed by a strong campaign in the foreign press, in digital media, paid for surveillance, and social media. They had the immediate support of Pompeo, Marco Rubio, Almagro, and other characters. Through social networks, a rarefied climate developed with an intense emotional charge to elicit expressions of adherence and moral support in the face of an hypothetical injustice. As have been studied by many analysts, appealing to emotions in networks engulf people in transitory sentimental communities and paralyze the ability to reason, judge, and verify where the limits are between reality and fiction. Most of these who got gathered in November 27 outside the doors of the Ministry of Culture were influenced by the atmosphere created in the networks. Few knew what actually happened in San Isidro and its protagonist. Perhaps some of them had had one or another bad experience and felt hurt. I think they honestly wanted to dialogue with the institution. Others, a minority, participated with total conscience in a plan against the revolution. They used social networks to amplify what was happening there and spread it unadulterated way. Fake news were rolled out around an imaginary crackdown that included tear gas, pepper spray, and alleged ambushes against participants. They knew they were helping to justify Trump policies against their country with lies. They were only interested in the dialogue to turn it into news, into a show, and score it as a victory. Some needed to justify the money they received. However, it is necessary to clearly separate the cartoon from the martyrs of San Isidro and what happened in the Ministry of Culture. In this second case, they were valuable young people who must be cared for. The cultural policy of the revolution has opened a wide and unprejudiced space for creators to be able to do their work in total freedom. It is true that there have been errors, misunderstandings, and blunders, but the revolution process itself has been in charge of rectifying them. The institutions, together with the UNIAC and the Hermanos Saiz Association, remain open to frank debate with artists and writers. If for any reason the dialogue, if interrupted, there are appropriate communication channels to resume it. It is totally legitimate to discuss how to consolidate the links between creators and institutions about experimental manifestation of art that have not been yet sufficiently understood, about the essential critical function. This is, I end here with the article and the clarification of what happened last week in Cuba. As I said, we are able to listen, we are able to negotiate, but not with mercenaries and not with people that are annexionists. And if they did something that is bad, they have to be punished for it. We receive, we have proof that they were commanded by the U.S. Embassy in Havana, by the U.S. government to create this unfortunate atmosphere that transpired in the mainstream media. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Ibete. Thank you for your intervention. But most importantly, thank you for your country, for your people, for your government, for helping out many countries throughout the world I think for the past 60 years, no? I think you mentioned that you had sent more than 400,000 healthcare workers. That's really, I think, unprecedented. At this point, allow me to mute everyone.
Wala nga siyang barya. 200 na binibigay ko.
Okay, sorry about that. At this point,
Find out
yeah.
if Gloria is still around because she has to leave. So if they're still around, then she can answer questions.
Okay, yeah, at this point, maybe we can prioritize.
I'm still around. Yes, I'm sorry. I have another Zoom meeting.
Okay, sorry, Dr. Gloria, Gloriani. Dr. Gloriani, maybe we can have a few questions from the participants, please. If you have questions for Dr. Gloriani.
I
Yeah,
think on the chat.
Pastor Bete.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Gloriani, for your intervention. Have been clarifying of what is happening in Philippines at the moment regarding the vaccines and the treatment. My question is regarding to the participants for the not in the trial, but the companies that wants to test their vaccines in the country. Do you have a limited number of companies, or whatever country, let's say Cuba, can apply to test vaccines there?
Yes, Ambassador. We have no limit to the number of companies who can actually do clinical trials, but we have those documents that we require. So it has to be, all the submissions will have to be complete. So, but we're open to any country actually. We actually prefer to have the clinical trials done here in the Philippines, so we know the response of the Filipinos to this vaccine. So we're very open to that. Any country, including Cuba, for that matter.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We are about to present in February the result of the trials of the Soberana 01. As you saw in the Dr. Martinez and Dr. Veres explanation, the vaccines at the moment have proved to be safe, very safe, both of them. Well, Soberana, I mean the 01, but what they need to test is how the people respond to it. So I will communicate to my country the availability of the Philippines to have the trials, to evaluate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gloriani. Thank you, Ambassador Ibete. More questions for Dr. Gloriani, please.
Tony,
The chat.
Please,
there
please.
is from Jovicky. There is a question from Jovicky. Can we call on Joe? I will just read.
Maybe Jovic can read it himself or herself. Sorry.
Hi, good morning, Dr. Gloriani.
Yes,
this is Jovic from the Philippine Daily Inquirer. Ma'am, I just want to ask kasi earlier our target number of participants for the Solidarity trial was at 2,000. And then WHO asked that if it's possible for us to increase it to 4,000. In your presentation, you mentioned that we might target as much as 15,000. I just want to know, did WHO ask for this expansion? And what was the reason behind the expansion? Also, can you share with us what are the other countries that are joining the Solidarity trials? Thank you.
Okay. Yes, David. Let me put it this way. When we first computed for the number of participants from the Philippines, it was based on the announcement of WHO that there will be 5 vaccines to be tested plus 1 placebo arm. So knowing there will be around 200 countries participating, it was our computation then that we will be contributing 2,000 participants to the overall Solidarity trial. And then later, this had to be actually the 4,000 was requested by the WHO during our site selection meeting, and we somehow tried to manage. Maybe we could realign some of the budget, because remember the Department of Science and Technology and UH are funding this, so we have limited resources also. So, but we will be able to somehow, realign some of these things so that we can cater to the 4,000. Now, the number of vaccinees or participants required for any one vaccine to test under clinical phase 3 trial is around 20 to around 30,000 at least. So what I'm trying to say is all over the world, for one vaccine, you need at least 20 to 30,000 participants. Now, given that some of the vaccines have not been identified for WHO, there is a possibility that only one, because they're very, very careful in actually choosing which one to test, there could only be one or two that will be tested. So that means the number of people that you have to include in the trial will have to be bigger if you want results within, let us say, 3 to 6 months. Okay. So, but right now, the 15,000 is just something that was suggested, but we're still going to decide on that because it will require a lot of logistics. Now, for the other countries, actually, there will be pilot countries who will kick off the solidarity trial, and there are two of them, and we are included. Now, one of them will be from PAHO, but I do not know if I can actually say which one, but for us, I can already say that because we have been very eager to actually participate. Now, for the countries, mostly they are from PAHO countries. So we're talking about Argentina, Colombia, El Salvador, Mexico. There's one more. So that's what, but there will be also vaccine teams from South Africa and other regions of the World Health Organization. I think for the WIPRO, which is where we belong, only the Philippines will be participating. So that is what I can answer for now. We would like to expand because, in these trials, we need as many participants as possible, but only up to what the country can actually absorb. We try to contribute as much as we can, but of course, we have to set the limits as well. Does that answer your question, Jovi?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. But just a quick follow-up. Nagkaroon na po ba ng costing as to how much the 15,000 participants would cost the Philippines? Because if I remember it right, the 2,000 would cost us 89.1 million. Is that right?
Yung 2,000 na 4,000, yung 89 up to about 98 million na-announce na, no? Hanggang 4,000 yon. So, hindi naman siguro magiging times 4. Actually, we're looking more at yung yung mga sa people, human resource, additional people that will be participating. So maybe another 50 million or so. But it's not easy to get that.
Just a final one from my end. Does this mean that if we are able to enroll the 15,000 participants, does that give us a priority in terms of the vaccine rollout?
I think so. Actually, we are part of COVAX facility, where the Philippines will be included in the prioritization for. We have the commitment to that, but the government will address that more than myself. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jovic. Thank you, Dr. Gloriani. Any more questions?
Hello, Tony.
From Melba Magay.
There are several questions on the chat, so maybe you can just look at the questions.
Partnership is okay. I've answered the partnership. People are having mixed reactions to the possibility of getting the vaccine. The procedure protocol you observed today are outstanding. What is your expertise during the day? No, I'd rather not dwell on the dengue vaccine, but we are very careful about the safety. So we have learned from that. The Department of Health, through the communications group that I actually presented, are working very hard so that we can address vaccine hesitancy and actually make the people aware of the benefits. And of course, there will be some risk because this is a trial, but largely benefits because the benefits must outweigh the risk. Like in any trials we've had before, like how we were able to avail of the other vaccines we've had. So yun, I think, no, I cannot answer that, Baksha. Sorry.
Okay, any more questions?
There's another question in the chat. Why the Philippines opts not to create
the vaccine
own vaccines?
Oh, yes, I'm so sorry, but the Philippines is not prepared or not geared to produce the COVID-19 vaccines. Unfortunately, we do not have the facilities, although we may have the people who could actually do that. And in a pandemic situation, you have to work fast. We are just about setting up. But just to assure everybody that the government is looking into the long-term plans for vaccine, our own vaccine resiliency. So that will be all. So we cannot. So right now we're just, like I said, Cuba is developing its own, but we are just trying or testing those that were developed by others because we are not yet capable. But we hope to capacitate ourselves eventually, soon, I hope.
Okay,
the other question, young. Asan na yung young? Why are the young active elderly now, 61 to 75, not a priority for more immediate vaccination? Okay, so given the limited probably vaccines that will come in, we need to prioritize. So then as the vaccines come slowly, then we have the priority groups. Well, I understand the 61 to, if you are a health worker and you are 61, you could be prioritized. If you have, we have only, let us say, 1,000 vaccines, you may be there. But we are hoping the next 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 will come later. And the government has actually a list of the priority groups, not necessarily number 1 to 10 or what, but they will also fine-tune who will actually need them at any time. Because, for instance, should there be an outbreak, it is possible, just possible, to also have an outbreak response using the vaccines available in that situation, because we want to avert more cases. So that is an open thing, I think, but rest assured the government is doing its best to, think of everyone, prioritizing everyone here in the vaccination. Ano pa? Wala na po. I think that's it.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Gloriani. Are there other questions from the floor?
Wala na yata.
Yes,
Melba
Mia.
is raising her hand.
Oh, yeah, please, Melba. Yeah, you may take the floor, Melba.
Yeah. Yes. In relation to the possibility of sidestepping the blockade, what is the possibility of an independent partnership between Philippines and Cuba, especially the Soberana research, when we're thinking long-term solution to some of our problems, not just with COVID, but with other medical problems in the health system? It looks like Cuba has had a long history of vaccine development, 17 years you're talking. What is the possibility of sidestepping the blockade sanctions by the US and other countries, and having Cuba's Soberana part of our clinical trials here in the Philippines, and also doing partnership in research together for the long term?
Ma'am, do I answer that? Ako po ba, ma'am? Ma'am Melba? You expect me to answer that?
Opo,
Okay.
Dr. Gloriani.
Yes po. Well, actually, I already said that it is possible to partner with virtually any country. And actually, if this is research, all the more it's better. And probably the entry point will be the Department of Science and Technology. But having agreements with the country itself will be better because we do have bilateral agreements. And I think Cuba is our partner as well. I mean, so that could be done. And I don't know how you are into the Department of Foreign Affairs, if you are somehow connected, because you can actually start the process there, make known your intentions, because we have a group that looks at all the possible COVID-19 vaccine candidates all over the world. So actually some of them, the government of the Philippines initiates the process, but some will just come to the Philippines and offer their products to be evaluated. So that is very possible, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. There's also a question from Professor Marivic Raquiza. It says here, will the government directly procure the vaccine or will a private company do this? And then we have to buy it from that company. She's worried about the prices going up.
Okay, we have a vaccine czar, that is Secretary Galvez. He will be announcing all of this very soon. But actually, they're considering everything so that only the cheapest but the safest and most efficacious vaccines will be procured. So all of these plans will be up to the task force. There is a task force, the vaccine cluster under Secretary Galvez, that will announce that. Please do not worry, because actually all of these have been considered already.
Thank you, Doctora. There's a question from Raquel Castillo. Will we have to pay to get a booster vaccine every year? We don't think lower income groups can afford it if it's not for free. Do you support the position of South Africa and India, IPR rules on patents related to COVID-19? I think Raquel is talking about the TRIPS waiver being proposed at the WTO. Now being supported, I think, by more than 2 countries. There are other countries who had expressed their support also.
Well, as far as I know, the government is planning to actually give all the vaccines for free. But, given the prioritization groups. But that means we need a lot of money to get to that. But from my own perspective, if we have private companies willing to buy vaccines for their employees, I think they should do that. So it's not as if the government alone will take up all of this responsibility, but for the most needy, the most vulnerable populations, that is what the government is planning all of this for. So from my another perspective, if I am capable of buying, why not? It's not, it's not every time that we get these things free. So those who cannot afford will have to be given free vaccines, but those who can afford, and I am sure the prices will be controlled. And if we're talking about patent, I think most of these will not use their patents. That's as far as I know now. It may change. Sorry. Okay.
Thank you, Doctora. There's also a question from Roy Cabonegro. What happens if some people don't want to be vaccinated?
Oh, no one will be forced. Oh, it's entirely voluntary. But everything will be explained to you, including the benefits and the risks. Okay, we have the informed consent, and that should be very comprehensive. And during the process of the informed consent, you can ask any questions, and you have to feel comfortable in, volunteering to be a participant. Then you sign it. But you have to be cooperative also, because there will be follow-ups, and you have to be monitored. So you have to receive instructions as well. I hope we can.
I think that's the last, Doctor.
Thank you very much.
Can we ask for a few seconds for picture taking with you on board?
Yes. Malapit na ako magsalita doon sa isa. 10 minutes.
Can we request everyone who wants to have their face appearing on the group photo to please open their video now?
So, Cora, will you be the one to take the pictures?
Yeah, unless you have some screenshots there. So can we have the first batch? Okay, please open your video and smile.
I'll also take.
So can we have everyone show their video? Oh.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let Dr. Gloriani go. Thank you very much for
Thank
your
you po,
contribution.
everyone.
Thank
Yes, to
you.
your work.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Okay, now
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck on your work, Dr. Gloriani.
Okay, now we will have the by Mia Laureliana of Phil
We have
Cuba.
not asked questions to. We have not asked questions to the
Okay,
ambassador.
sorry. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Are there questions? By the way.
Tony, there are questions on the chat. So if Ambassador Ibete can also look at
Yeah.
them.
So here's a question from Carol P. Araulio. Any cooperation with Cuba on the vaccine research would be by the U.S. blockade? Ready, but you know, feel expound.
Can you repeat the question again?
Cuba, would that be subject to restrictions from the U.S.?
The dog barking loudly. I
Can
cannot
anyone
leave.
can the co-hosts okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, Ambassador, the question was about the
Se fue la transmisión.
Cora, nawala si Tony.
No, it's there. Okay, Ambassador Ibete?
Yes, I'm here, but I
Yeah.
couldn't listen to the question. Can you repeat it, please?
Oh, okay. Let me start from the. We have a question here for you.
Yes.
Wait, I'll have to go back actually.
yeah, please. Sorry, I got disconnected.
Okay.
Poor internet.
Tony.
And I lost the chat. Yeah, all of the chat has been erased because I got disconnected.
Oh, okay. Let's see. I can't find them actually.
So I think Carol Araulio's question was whether cooperation with Cuba would be impeded by the blockade,
Well,
by the U.S. blockade.
as you know, Cuba has had cooperation with many countries around the world, with more than 64 countries around the world. In the past 56 years. Cooperation have been channeled from different terms. I mean, it have been first training students, training other specialties for medicine and different careers, but also have been in the sector of research, which is totally possible. Cuba, in the framework of extended cooperation, cooperation and businesses, we have thinking in different ways that we can do it. It doesn't have to be 100% joint venture, but also can be transfer of technology, which is totally possible to countries that are willing to work with us in terms of research. We are able to cooperate, and blockade cannot avoid it, although there is a will from the government that is receiving the cooperation to stop it because they have under the pressure of US. But for us, it's not a problem. If the Philippines or if any country in the world requests Cuban cooperation in training or in research or a joint collaboration in joint research, we are able to do it. It only, the only thing that can stop that is if the government that want to have the cooperation is stopped by the pressure of US. But yes, we are ready. We are ready, and blockade cannot work on it. It's a will of both states in cooperate. Okay.
Then there's another question. Oh, sorry. Yeah, there's another question from Raquel Castillo to the ambassador. What is your prognosis for a shift in policy read the Cuban blockade with the new administration? I guess with the incoming administration of Joe Biden.
Well, we need to have as a starting point that the interest of US on Cuba have been always dominate the country. For many years, we have extended our hand to have normal relations. The only thing that Cuba is requesting is to be treated as an equal with respect, as an independent country with sovereignty. With nobody, where nobody can come and say what we need to do. In terms of the new administration, the only thing I can say is that it cannot be worse than it was Trump administration. It cannot, because the president-to-be Biden was the deputy president of Obama, and as you know, Obama was the one who reestablished diplomatic relations with Cuba, and the one who tried to normalize the bilateral relation, even though it fell short. But at the end of the day, he made a step, and a new government that maybe in terms of external policy is close to his ideology, I mean, of the previous government. This one, I don't see a scenario in which blockade can be reinforced or be bring to the point that it was bring by the Trump administration, which is, I think, blockade at the end of the day is what affects the most the enormous relationship between Cuba and the US.
Tony, there's another question. Tony, can you hear me? Tony?
Thank you, Ambassador. There's a question from Lay. Yeah, please. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. No.
I was about to say that. What is? Yeah. Yes.
Me?
Yes, yes.
Oh,
Go ahead.
no, I was also reading.
Yes, Princess, go ahead.
I was reading the chat, and there's a question from Josh San Pedro. He was asking if Cuba has gotten in touch, let's say, with WHO to be part of COVAX, and also the WHO Solidarity Trial for Vaccines. And this is addressed to the ambassador.
Princess, can you repeat, please?
Okay, it says here, addressed to the speakers, the potential for Soberana, one, to be part of the WHO Solidarity Trial for Vaccines. Have you initiated discussions or negotiations with the WHO to be part of COVAX and also the WHO Solidarity Trial for Vaccines? Because I think the vaccines that are coming into the Philippines are part of the WHO mechanisms and process.
Yes, as far as I know, I don't have any information on the participation of Soberana in the COVAX, but our vaccine have been registered or recognized by the WHO at the moment. Soberana 01, which is our first.
Perhaps you can pursue that, Ambassador.
Yes, sure.
Tony? Next.
Tony, nawala ka na naman.
Yeah, I'm having internet connection problems. Okay. Other questions? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it says here your internet connection is unstable. Okay, anyway, are there other questions? Or perhaps I can read a comment by Carol Araulio. US lobby needs to be countered by push of the Filipino people to the Philippine government for cooperation with Cuba on COVID-19 vaccine research and possible use inside the country. Other questions or comments, please? Otherwise, may we invite Maria Mer Laurinaria to give us a summary or some reflections. Miel is a very active member of the PhilCuba working group and is an ardent supporter of Cuba and has been following developments in Cuba, particularly here in the COVID-19 vaccine development.
It's almost noon. Good noon to everyone, to Ambassador Fernandez, the rest of the participants, friends from the media, and members of PhilCuba. We had a rich and lively discussion this morning. Indeed, we are very fortunate to have these two guests as speakers. Let me just mention some salient points in this morning's forum. Number one, we practically had a short but comprehensive course on the different kinds of COVID-19 vaccines and the process prior to approval. We learned about the status of applications of companies that want to conduct clinical trials here. We learned more about Philippine participation in the solidarity trials initiated by the World Health Organization, how the trials would go about, which hospitals will
Miel? Can you unmute?
Miel, you're...
Miel.
Miel? Okay.
That although the vaccines are was given the sole authority to deal with companies on the procurement, for the procurement of vaccines, we learned that the DOST group, COVID vaccine body, is there to evaluate the vaccines. From Cuba's video, Dr. Martinez explained the factors that made possible the prompt work at vaccine development against COVID-19, such as the years of experience with vaccines, the scientists who worked on the early vaccines who are still there, and the entire health system of Cuba. Dr. Veres Bencomo expounded on the process, but the video evidently was recorded months earlier, a month or two after the start of the clinical trials of Soberana 1. The ambassador gave us the bigger context, the bigger Cuban context, and updated the developments on the vaccine. She made us understand how the financial, commercial, and economic blockade and other economic and financial difficulty impact on the development of the vaccines and on the whole task of combating COVID-19. I think the most striking questions or comments centered on the possibility of acquisition of Cuban vaccines and the possible cooperation or more cooperation between the two countries on this field. Well, I was quite tickled by this question, why the Philippines opt not to create its own vaccines. And Dr. Gloriani gave us her answer. Speaking of the blockade, this is now my take. Many of us in the Philippines, especially those who never experienced a blockade of whatever form, do not understand what a blockade is. It's difficult for them to imagine. So let us have something very concrete, something we know about. It's Western Union. That's the keyword, Western Union. Western Union has 407 payment points in Cuba, and 2.7 million Cubans in the US diaspora send money to relatives in Cuba through this company. But the US Treasury, Office of Foreign Assets Control, or OFAC, announced on October 27 that starting November 26, Western Union has to stop operations in Cuba because of its sanctions against Fincemex, Western Union's partner in Cuba. Because according to Mike Pompeo, Fincemex is linked with the Cuban military. Imagine how much money Cubans would not receive as a result of this. But that's only one. Ambassador has mentioned some other examples. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miel. Thank you for summarizing it. It's not a very easy task. If you don't mind, Ambassador Ibete, there's a question here, and I'm also very much interested. The status of the clinical trial of Soberana, is it phase 3 already, or what phase is it?
We are in phase 2.
Phase
Yes,
2.
phase
Okay.
2.
Thank you so much.
Phase 3 will be completed in February.
Okay. I guess for the last part, thank you very much, Ambassador Ibete. For the last part, we will have Gina de la Cruz to give us, to update us on upcoming activities of PhilCuba. Gina, you may have the floor, please.
Yes. Yeah, can you hear me now, Tony?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for being with us today. We thought that this webinar is so essential because at this time, point in time, we are still all grappling on what vaccine should be acquired by the Philippines, and we thought of bringing Cuba and all their developments in the pharmaceutical and medical field. As PhilCuba, which was established in the year 2000, after 20 years, we would like to report to you under the leadership of Dr. Francisco de Menso or Cadudong, we were able to participate in the campaign worldwide of lifting the blockade, the US imposed blockade. We were able to participate in the campaign to release the Cuban 5 heroes. We were able to host the 9th Asia Pacific Regional Conference in solidarity with Cuba, which was held in Manila 2 years ago. And we were able to participate in several solidarity conferences held in Sri Lanka and Nepal. In the coming year, 2021, we are very glad and we will enjoy and focus our solidarity activities among the youth and students on the cultural side of the solidarity and friendship between Cuba and the Philippines. And also, we will also develop friendship and solidarity among medical practitioners and health workers, so that they may be able to listen, and we will be able to bring the discourse of the stellar developments and accomplishments of Cuban medical field and science and technology. We will also be glad to bring henceforth membership activities or the expansion of the PhilCuba. And also, we would like to enjoin everyone to support our 2 medical students, one in her 2nd year, Justine Domdom, in medical school in Cuba, Havana, Cuba. And in January of next year, another scholar, Malaya Torsar, will be studying too in Elam. So with all that activities, please everyone, leave your email addresses in this chat group, in this chat room, in our Facebook page, and in our website, philcuba.com. So yun lang po. Once again, salamat sa lahat, and to Her Excellency Ambassador Ivete Fernandez Hernandez, thank you so much. Good noon, everyone. Good afternoon.
Gina,
Yes.
include our campaign to endorse, to support the nomination.
We are today finishing our nomination for the Henry Reeve Brigade, Medical Brigade, the one that was mentioned by Ambassador Ibete a while ago. They were able to send 4,000 medical health workers to different countries, especially in Latin America and the marginalized countries who cannot afford superb healthcare. But Cuba is continuously sending the Henry Reeve Brigade, and we are campaigning and we are endorsing, nominating. Kadudong has just submitted Dr. Nemenso as a former president of the University of the Philippines and professor emeritus and president of PhilCuba. We are sending our nominations to the Nobel. So we hope that our nomination shall be accepted. And we are just very glad, Ambassador, to report that to you and to the ECAP.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gina. I think allow me to thank also Miel, Laurinaria, Kadudong, and most especially, of course, Ambassador Ibete. Conclude our webinar on Soberana, the Cuban vaccine. We also conclude this seminar about developments here in the Philippines about the coronavirus vaccines. Thank you very much again, Ambassador Ibete and everyone.
I have to thank you for the opportunity, because every time that we have this kind of webinar is the opportunity and the occasion to talk about Cuba. Not every day you can listen to the truth, and I'm glad to share with you and that you are able to organize this kind of activities in order to teach and to bring knowledge to everybody. Thank you so much for the opportunity and for being so active. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, Ambassador. Thank you. Salamat sa lahat. Pasensya na.
Salamat. There are more than, how many attended? There are more than 67 ang count ko.
Song. Cuban music. Patugtugin yung Cuban music.
Yeah,
Ay,
Cuban music.
Umabot tayo ng mga 60 plus, 62.
Yeah, 62, yeah.
Yeah, nakita
Parang
ko.
67, my last count was 67. Siguro some of them left already.
Tapos may 4 sa Facebook. Oh, hindi sila maka-access. May problema.
Recorded, Tita Cora, recorded to, no?
Merong may nakakat kanina.
Hinihingi ng Rappler and GMA7 and Inquirer yung recordings natin.
We should provide that to everyone in recording.
Oo, dito pa yung mga tao Okay. They're still here. 21 pa.
21 pa. Nandito.
Dami pa. Nandito pa ang kapuso.
Oo.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you.
Salamat din. Pasensya na. Medyo nahirapan ako magbasa 700 So,
Ay,
when?
Kailan tayo sa ni Ambassador? 16 or 20?
Wala ko 16 na.
Okay naman yung mo, no? Audio mo, Weng? Okay na?
Ikaw ba nagpapatugtog, Tony?
Oo, pinasabi ni Princess.
Lagi akong nag-o-off kaya hindi ako makasagot.
Ako rin, towards the end, 4 na beses.
Sayang yung sa'yo, Tony, nakat ka?
Wala, ganun talaga Beyond our control Pinatay ko Di ba, no problem.
Pati din ang music mo, naglalag na din.
Nandiyan pa si Ambassador?
Wala na.
Yata.
Oo, ang haba. Ang haba ng Ambassador.
Yung yung Na o ngayon?
Ah?
Naglalag kanina nung umpisa o ngayon?
Kanina, oo. Humina
Wow.
na din.
Ay, naku, nasa FB
Ah,
live
Tony.
lang tayo. Tita Cora, baka pwede nang putulan yung sa Facebook. Naririnig daw tayo, sabi ni Shofty. Naririnig pa po kayo sa FB live. Ayun, tapos. Kasi chichismis pa tayo.
Naputol na. May
Ayun,
sasabihin
naputol
pa
na.
naman.
Yeah. Naputol na yung sa...
Putol na ba?
Hello, can you tell me, have you ended the webinar? Shall I end
Yes.
the recording?
Yeah, end it.
Oo.
Naririnig tayo.
Yeah.